My name is Romina Montenegro, and today we'll be speaking about the article Tale of Two Worlds, Core and Periphery in the Post-Cold War Era by James M. Goldgeier and Michael McFaul. So this article concentrates on the aftermath of the Cold War, where international relations theorists have debated the stability of a world with two great powers versus a world with multiple great powers. I'd like to start off by saying structural realism aka neorealism, is a theory of international relations that says that power is the most important factor in international relations. And the reason for me explaining this phrase is because it is the base of some security analysts' predictions that a world of several great powers will lead to a return of the shifting alliances and instabilities of the multipolar era that existed prior to World War II. The authors argue that because of the nature of states and the nature of international systems are fundamentally unlike for those described by structural realists, the balance of power politics won't be one of the major interactions among great powers in the coming decades. Unlike previous realist predictions about the effects of multipolarity, the authors predict that the collapse of communism will allow the world to progress to an international order governed politically by multiple greats. And this helps us understand the authors when they say that the great powers of the future will be non-unitary actors who are focused on wealth. These combined powers will work within what the authors describe as a great power society, where they will not attempt to create and balance alliances, but will settle conflicts and enhance their security through negotiation and compromise instead of through conflicts and wars out in the battlefield. The authors both agree that history has not yet ended. They also don't believe that neoliberalism nor neoliberalism will be the ideologies that surpass all other ideologies. There are multiple reasons for these beliefs. First, ideological and systemic homogenization tendencies aren't consistently leading our world to a utopian end, but rather are depending on the collapse of communism. Second, a revolutionary disturbance in any of the major powers can potentially lead to another ideologically diverse system. An example of this can be seen with the French and Russian revolutions. And third, economic and government regulations of the world's great powers aren't yet global, but confined mainly to these powers. And while the increasing similarity of standards within the core will likely diminish the ability of realism to explain the behavior of these great powers in the world, realism will likely still help explain the behavior of states within regional systems outside of the economic and political core. The authors have challenged the conclusion that the presence or absence of war is because of the amount of great powers in the system. There's a belief among international realists that bipolarity is more stable than multipolarity, which leads to concerns about the New World Order. To argue this, the authors state that the distribution of power isn't relevant to the stability of the system, unlike structural realists have previously suggested. During the Cold War, argue the authors, multiple weapons were solely responsible for preventing armed conflicts between the United States of America and the Soviet Union, not bipolarity. Focusing more on what affects the likelihood of war would lead to further examination on the combination of markets, democracy, and technology. During the Cold War, the great powers of the world did not share standards about economics and politics, only the steadiness of terror through nuclear weapons discouraged superpower war. However, as great powers come to share norms about markets and democracy and create overall alliances, maintaining nuclear balances among the great powers will be less necessary in preventing war between them. And so the authors have divided their argument into three sections. The first section is called The Tenets of Structural Realism. The appeal of structural realism is that to predict state behaviors, it only takes a few critical assumptions about the nature of states and the international system into consideration. These assumptions are 1. All states are fundamentally alike, and 2. The central feature of the international system is anarchy. And because the system is anarchic, every state provides their own security through internal efforts, which is strengthening their armaments or economic wealth, or by external efforts, which is forming alliances in the other states. In bipolar system, there are doubts about which state is in alliance with who because there are only two superpowers needed in order to become the supreme. While in a multi-power system, equality of power between more than two states means that some states can create a policy and overcome other independence. This leads to learning that there are no permanent friendships, but rather only temporary alliances. The second section is titled The International System of the World. Here, the authors explore why realism presented a captivating explanation for what many aspects of international power politics in the multipolar international system existing pre-World War II. In the 19th century, the leading powers formed the concert of Europe to stray away from reaching anarchy in the international system. At this point in time, every state opposed a conflict. However, because of the lack of shared regulations about democracy and capitalism, each state needed to prepare to protect their own. This led to the use of force in order to achieve wealth and power and to ensure security. The last section is called The International System Today, A Tale of Two Worlds. In this final section of the article, the authors demonstrate why the theory is no longer applied to politics in the core and argues that to predict the behaviors of great powers, a new model is needed. The authors can be quoted as saying, "We are not arguing that relations between the great powers are harmonious, we are merely arguing that conflict is bounded by the norms that have arisen." Over the years, we've seen patterns of norms and ideas about the domestic and international nature of politics and economics among today's major states, which has led to great power societies in the international system. This means that more than ever, states are willing to negotiate and accept norms about legitimate international behavior. Assuming that states are unitary actors regresses the development of theory about the behavior of great powers today. We are clearly seeing a preference for friendly discussions and alliances among states rather than conflict, something that can't be seen throughout history. To conclude, close examination debunks the argument that pessimists make on why the world has been more stable post-war. Depriving the world of nuclear weapons doesn't mean that bipolarity would have been able to prevent a war. Instead, it was simply because the great powers don't share enough norms and regulations in order to advance. In our world, there are simply too many states who fear that being defeated at war was a wage they were not willing to bet on. The authors leave us with their final thoughts that the role of nuclear weapons, economic interdependence, and political democracy play in our world needs to be researched more to understand state interaction, not some great specification of multi or bipolarity. Thank you.